And I think that this is going to be, the perfect segue into who we have coming on next. Our friends from the ACLU, Ann and Christy, who have been doing amazing work themselves. And I'm just super excited to hear, their take on this and how these things have come into fruition. I know Ann has seen so much, and I'm sure Christy has seen a lot as well. And so this is really going to be amazing. I think, like what I'm thinking like from this is just like this ability to like strategize to like move us forward. I think Melissa said something that was very key in that, all hope isn't lost. And I think a lot of times, like folks in community, like we get that feeling that like all hope is lost and that, they're doing this thing and that like there's no out. And, just hearing her speak really just reminded me that, there are so many outs and that, our folks aren't armed. We don't have the opportunity. It takes to be in places of privilege to be armed with the opportunity sometimes to even understand what's going on, at the local level, and to even understand what's going on at the General Assembly. I mean, I went to school for political science, and I'm just now and unfortunately, like, even I'm just now, understanding like some of these things and the inner workings. And so really interested to hear what Christy and Ann and how they will influence this conversation. Um, but definitely want to go ahead and try to move us forward in the agenda. So I know that they are going to come on and they're going to talk about a little bit more in depth, just what it's going to mean for North Carolina and, how is this really going to impact us and how is this going to land on our communities and what should we expect from the legal aspect of this and also just from the legal aspect and also from just the aspect of like being people and like moving around in society. Like, what is all of this going to mean? And, exactly how are we going to continue to strategize moving forward? So really happy to pass it over to Christy and Ann. So whenever you're ready.
Hey, y'all. Thank y'all so much for having us.
Yes. No, thank you for coming on. Really excited for you all.
Thank you. And if it's loud, it's because Ann and I are inside of the General Assembly right now. And so it can be pretty loud out here. But again, thank you for having us both. My name is Christy Puckett Williams, and I'm the statewide campaign for Smart Justice Manager with the ACLU. And I tend to focus on all things that are related to the criminal legal system. And I just became registered as a lobbyist with the rest of my team. And so I'm super excited to be working more deeply with Ann. And Ann is our senior policy counsel. And her job is to stay in this building and to ring the alarm and let us know what's happening. And so today we're going to have a conversation. Ann is going to give us some background on these bills and a lot of the work that she and others on our team have worked on. And then we'll also talk about what do we see moving forward. So again, thank y'all so much for having us. Ann, do you want to say anything?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for including us. And we're just really excited to see so many folks participating in this. I know that things that happen at the legislature can seem really opaque and hidden from the public. And part of our mission is to lift that veil, right? And make sure that everyone can know what's happening in the people's house. And everyone can have their voice heard here. We know that that's not always easy. And again, we apologize for the background noise. There's lots of folks here in the building engaging and lobbying today. And so it's a little noisy. If folks really can't hear us, please do let us know in the chat. So real quick, so Christy and I are going to share kind of our different perspectives. I can share a bit about this bill, how it came about procedurally in a way that was pretty messed up, and how the bill would actually work as a legal matter. And then Christy and I will just kind of share back and forth a little bit about like that aspect of the bill, and then like how Christy has seen those things play out on the ground in protest situations in Elizabeth City, in Charlotte, and other parts of the state. So please jump in at any moment with questions. We would, really love to engage with folks as you have questions.
All right, and so what does HB 805 do that existing laws do not? We're just going to jump right in for the people who may just be joining us.
So I think what's important for us to know is that, we already have a bad rioting statute on the books here in North Carolina. And this bill just takes it to a whole other level. And that's why we're so upset and concerned about stopping HB 805. Our rioting law is already clearly based on stopping people of color, people who are otherwise marginalized from protesting. It defines a riot as it only has to be 3 or more people, so that's like a couple of folks standing on the street corner, right? And it uses very, very broad terms. So those 3 people have to be engaging in disorderly or violent conduct, right? So what does disorderly mean? We certainly have law that gets into that, but it's a very broad term. And they have to injure a person or damage property or threaten to injure a person or damage property. So if we think about those ideas, those are very, very subjective. And that means that a police officer or perhaps another person walking down the street who feels threatened and calls the police, and even a magistrate or a judge could have very different ideas about what's going on with that group of 3 or more people and whether they meet this definition of rioting. And so that's kind of our baseline, right? That's where we're starting. Right now, a person who meets that definition, who's in a group like that, can be charged with a class 1 misdemeanor, right? So that's, misdemeanors are less serious than felonies, but it's one of the higher misdemeanors. And then if anybody in the group, and this is the current law, if anybody in the group causes $1,500 in property damage or serious bodily injury to somebody, or has a weapon on them, any kind of weapon, or like a substance that's dangerous, like pepper spray, for example, any person in that group can get charged with a class H felony. Now that's a lower level felony, but it's still a felony, and felonies carry really serious consequences, as a lot of folks understand. And so that's where we're starting, right? We already have a pretty serious consequences for what could be very minor behavior and is already very subjective. So this is our baseline. And here we have this bill come in, and with, I think it was 1 day notice, they had a hearing at 8:30 in the morning. And I can tell you that Melissa Price-Crom and someone from my office were the only 2 people who spoke against the bill, because there was hardly anybody in the room, with the Speaker of the House, who's one of the most powerful people in this building, presenting this bill. And they moved it straight through from that committee to the Rules Committee and then to the House floor for a vote extremely quickly. And hardly anybody had any idea, what was going on with the bill, right? Like it moved so fast. And that's a tactic. That's a tactic to keep the public from pushing back against the bill. It's a tactic to prevent the opposing party from understanding what's going on with the bill and getting their act together to oppose it, to keep the media from getting engaged in it. It was clearly intentional. So this is the stage that we had set right when this bill came down. So the question that Christy asked me originally was, what does HB 805 do that existing laws do not? And what it does is it takes that baseline of that subjective definition of engaging in a riot, it keeps it, right? And then it makes it possible for people to get charged with even more serious felony charges. So we're talking about raising the felony, so keeping that class H felony for someone who is limited, who has a dangerous weapon with them at a riot. So this is, let's say you carry pepper spray with you all the time and it's in your bag, and then you end up at a protest where they believe that you were engaging in a riot, and normally that would be a class 1 misdemeanor. all of a sudden, because you had that pepper spray in your bag, you didn't do anything with it. It was just there. You had it in your possession. All of a sudden, you've got a Class H felony. Let's say somebody else in the group that's called a riot decides to break a window, and you weren't even part of it. This bill would say, okay, now you get a Class F felony. And that Class F felony means that if you're 16 or 17 years old, and right now we can't take you to adult court, well, because it's a Class F felony, yes, we can. So here we have a 17-year-old, high school student who decides to go out to a protest, and somebody else in the protest breaks a window. All of a sudden, that kid is in adult court for a Class F felony, right? And that is a more serious record. That is more serious consequences. That is potential to spend time in jail. And so that's a really serious concern. This bill also creates an even higher felony, a Class E felony, if anyone in the riot does something that leads to the death of another person. Now, surely, activity that leads to the death of another person is very serious, but we're talking about charging anyone who's in that group of 3 or more with being responsible for that death, even if they had no part in the physical activity that led to that harm. So this is where we are the most concerned, is with the constitutionality really of our current law and with this proposal, right? We're talking about folks being charged with extremely serious crimes, and even with Class 1 misdemeanors for the activities of other people, right? So somebody else over there decides to throw that brick through that window, or somebody else over there decides to set that trash can on fire. Maybe you're just protesting and you decided to stay out past curfew. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. But all of a sudden, you're at risk for a much higher level charge and justice involvement than you ever anticipated. And what does that do? I want to talk to Chrissy a little bit more about what does that mean for folks who are out protesting, everyday folks. So I think I've covered the main things that have to do with the higher penalties. And I just want to touch on a couple of other really bad things about this bill. And then we'll talk about how that relates to chilling the right to protest. This bill increases the penalties for what is called inciting people to riot. So that means a lot of things that you might do: sending a text message, writing, calling out to a friend across the street, hey, come over here, starting a chant, right? There are a lot of things that could potentially be part of that charge. And all of a sudden, you could be responsible not only for the highest possible level misdemeanor charge, Class A1 misdemeanor, just for sending that text message or starting that chant. But also, if that riot then leads to property damage over a certain amount, death or injury to a person, all of a sudden you've got these high-level felonies also on you, even if the only thing they know you did is send that text message or start that chant. The one other piece that we just really want folks to understand how serious it is in this bill is the piece that would say that if you get arrested for rioting or looting, you cannot have your bail set by a magistrate. You have to go to a district court judge. Now, let me just break that down for you. What that means is, when do most protests happen, right? Fridays, weekends. And usually any, run-of-the-mill arrest, you go to a magistrate almost right away at the jail. Doesn't matter what time of day it is, they're there 24 hours a day. Sometimes there can be delays, sometimes there can be a little bit of time, but typically you have a right to see the magistrate pretty much right away. The magistrate certifies whether they think the charges are constitutional, and then you get a chance to have bail set. Now, we can have a whole other conversation about how unfair the bail system is, about how wrong it is, about how we should not have cash bail to begin with. But let's set that aside just for the moment. If if you go to the magistrate and you get your bail set, then you have a chance to have, a friend or somebody pay your bail, or a bail bonds person, and then you can get out, right? So then you're out, and you could be out, in a matter of hours. This bill says if you get charged, you have to wait with rioting or looting, you have to wait until the district court judge is available. So you have to wait until that district court judge is having a session, right? So that's usually a weekday morning, if you're lucky, or a couple times a week if you live in a county that doesn't have court very much, maybe even once a week in a county that's real rural. So we're talking minimum. Let's say you're in Wake County where they have court every day during the week. You get arrested on a Friday night, there's not court again until Monday morning. So you can't even pay money to get out of jail between that arrest and that Monday morning court hearing. So you're guaranteed to sit in jail. And that is the intention of this piece of the law. The Speaker of the House was asked why, he volunteered that he wanted this in there because they believed that people were bouncing in and out of jail and getting bonded out and going straight back into the protest. And they truly want to use this law to unconstitutionally hold people in jail without access to bail, with no hearing before a magistrate over the weekend or overnight, so that they can hold folks who have been charged and not convicted of anything in jail for additional time. The only category of people for whom this type of detention applies right now in North Carolina is folks who have been charged with domestic violence. They have like a cooling off period. And then occasionally folks who are extremely intoxicated and are unable to sort of engage with a judge or a magistrate. That is very limited, right? So it's basically those folks and then folks who have been charged with like capital murder. And we're talking about treating folks who are protesting the same way. So we just really wanted to highlight how deeply concerning that part of the bill is. And I really want to hear from Christy about how that piece in particular could chill, engagement in First Amendment activities. So I'm going to take a little break because I know I've been talking a lot of law. And I want Christy to share a little bit of her thoughts about how all of that might resonate with folks who are trying to engage in First Amendment protected protest.
I definitely think it is, the intent is to chill, as you stated, people's desire to protest and engage in basic American behavior, right? So like this country was founded upon protest. I say this all the time, that throwing the tea in the harbor was a protest, and it was a riotous act. It was property damage, right? That tea cost money and they wasn't paying taxes on that tea. And so they did damage to property to establish this country. But when Black people and brown people and poor people engage in that same behavior, we are targeted in this country. And so I believe that this is the intent, and it will be the impact if this bill is passed. And so that's why it is important that those of us who, number one, believe in people's right to dissent should be contacting every single legislator they can about HB 805, whether it's a senator or a House representative. You should be blowing up their emails, blowing up their phones, telling them that you do not support this bill, because it is born out of racism, y'all. I also believe Speaker Tim Moore said that he introduced this bill as a direct response to the Black Lives Matter movement. And so, I mean, they're no longer saying the quiet parts quietly. They're saying the quiet parts out loud. And we see this very clearly in this legislation. And so I think for someone like myself, who often participates or observes or goes to protests across the state, we will see people hesitate to engage in these behaviors and go out and support movements that they feel strongly about as a result of this. And so I know for me, as someone who already has an extensive criminal history, the threat of a criminal charge is not as serious as it is for people who don't have a criminal history. I've already borne all of the collateral consequences that come with having a criminal history. So for me, it's like, whatever, what you gonna add an extra, what's the new felony? You got a new felony and they can give out? I don't think they have new, you know what I mean? Like what's higher than a felony? I don't think they have anything higher than a felony, right? So like I'm safe, right? And so, but for other people, you're not safe, right? And so think of people, which is what I saw last year. Last summer, we had kids coming out to protest what they saw happen to George Floyd back in May. And as a result, they were arrested. And as a result of that arrest, there are people who are no longer able to attend school. So they've lost their ability to go to college. People who are now having problems obtaining houses or jobs simply because they supported a movement, and they supported that movement by showing up every single day in their respective cities, marching, chanting, demanding. And so the response to that was to not just arrest them, but to saddle them down with a criminal record for the rest of their lives, y'all. And our current expungement laws aren't such that you can get your record expunged relatively quickly. So even if the charges are, well, if they're dismissed, then you might be good. But say they're not dismissed and you're found guilty, you pay that fee or that fine, it'll be years before you will be eligible to have something so simple removed from your account, from your background. And so I just see so many potential we already have millions of North Carolinians living with a criminal history. And this just exponentially casts a greater net to just encapsulate more people bringing them into the criminal legal procedure. And that part that Anne, she went over about the magistrate, that's crucial. Because when you get arrested, you have an opportunity to see a judicial official immediately. And you have the opportunity, lots of people don't know they have the opportunity, but you have the opportunity to argue if the charges that were brought against you were even valid or not. And we saw this happen in Elizabeth City where I was arrested, and we were able to argue, my counsel at the time were able to argue and have those charges decertified. So what does that mean? It means that I was never even charged, like formally. I was arrested by the police, and the charges were presented to the magistrate, who then denied those charges. And I was immediately released, no money exchanged hands, right? So this bill seeks to take that away. Had this bill been in place in Elizabeth City at that time, I would have waited. And in Elizabeth City, in Pasquotank, in the District 1, they have first appearance court once every couple of weeks. So like, I know people who were arrested, like my court date, I was arrested back in May, but my court date, my first appearance wasn't until recently, like June 24th or something, like July something. So not even first appearance doesn't even happen in a few weeks. Sometimes it can be many, many weeks before a person is able to see a judicial official. And so, you know, I can just think of, again, so many ways. I think about how, again, I was arrested 2 times in Elizabeth City. The second time, they had issued a dispersal order. They modified the dispersal order, and we were on the sidewalk. The officer said, if we got out of the street, no, let me just make a note. I was never in the street because I know better. Like I already knew they were inching to arrest me and others. I already knew it. We knew that they were looking to us. So we stayed on the sidewalk the entire time. And so they modified first they gave out an unlawful order saying that we had to move now. And I told them, like, no, you have to give us a reasonable time. The statute says reasonable time. Now is not reasonable. How much time? And they eventually ended up giving us 5 minutes. They modified the original order to give us 5 minutes to disperse. Then they modified it again to tell us to get on the sidewalk. And if we were on the sidewalk and dispersing, that we would not be arrested. And we were arrested over 20 blocks away. And so, you know, this practice in some places is already happening. They're just looking to make sure that it happens statewide. And so, again, I can't begin to tell you how much of an impact this is going to have on people's ability to gather. I mean, 3 or more people, y'all, you know, in church, they say, if 3 or more come together, touch and agree, it shall be so. And now it seems like, right, that if 3 or more come together, touch and agree, we're going to be criminalized. I don't know how you see it, Anne, but that's definitely how I see it. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like, this is just really, really bad. And it's just really, really bad. And it's targeted towards Black people. If you don't get nothing else out of this today, what I say, Black people, it is like you have a target on your back. You have a target on your back. And to someone's point in the chat that it said that, you know, they're going to place folks oftentimes police and law enforcement into these movements to do these things. If this bill is passed, you could just be walking down the street, right? You could just be walking down the street and you're part of a group that is protesting and voicing your concerns, and then somebody does something, and now all of y'all are charged with very serious charges just simply for being there. And to Ann's point about just having a can of mace, having a pocket knife, a Swiss Army knife, anything can be a weapon, according to the police. They can deem anything a weapon. I mean, I've seen the police try to tell me one time when I was arrested a long time ago that the rat tail comb, and Black people know what I mean by rat tail comb, the rat tail comb that I had was a comb, y'all, with a long end on it. Like, they said that was a weapon. So like, anything can be weaponized against people, especially Black, brown, and poor people, by law enforcement and by the state. And again, this is the state's attempt to not just chill, but to silence the voices of Black people, because to chill is like some people still gonna be talking and some not. But this is an attempt to silence us all, to just really keep us from going out there. And so I don't know. And what do you see as the way that people should engage or could engage? Or who are those key people? And I can call everybody, but who are the key players that people should direct their attention to, in your estimation, around this bill?
Yeah, thanks, Christy, for that. And and I'll say I agree completely that I think especially the like having a weapon in your possession piece is really ripe for abuse. Using the fact of a riot as a way to search people is also a problem. And then, the potential that almost anything you might have in your possession, whether it's a water bottle that you put in the freezer because it's hot out, or whether it's, a comb, like Christy was talking about, all those things have the potential to be twisted into, being considered a weapon. The question Christy asked about who we should be targeting. So let me just make sure folks are clear about where this bill is, right? So Tim Moore, who's the Speaker of the House, filed the bill, got it passed through the House very quickly. Now the bill has to go to the Senate. And, the House and the Senate don't always get along. They often have negotiations between each other. We fully expect this bill will move in the Senate. It has not been scheduled yet. But the target right now is anybody in the Senate, but especially Senate Democrats. Folks should really be focused on them. We need to show that the Democrats can stand together 100% in opposition to this bill, in large part because, if the path to defeating it ends up having to go through the governor, we need to give the governor a clear signal that everybody is going to come together and support that veto. And that did not happen in the House, and we can have a whole conversation about that. But if we're going to make that our strategy as a movement to kill this bill, then the Senate Democrats really need to come down hard on this bill. And of course, always be reaching out to the Republicans as well, to make it clear that this is unacceptable behavior. But we have a radical right-wing leadership here in the North Carolina General Assembly. So, some of those folks are harder to move, but it's important that we continue. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Amelia. Apologies. I got my C4 hat sort of spinning here. I apologize, y'all. So that's where we are procedurally with the bill. It's in the Senate, and we are waiting for it to receive a hearing, and we'll see if they make any attempts to change the bill at that point. One thing I just wanted to touch on real briefly, that Christy and I were both speaking about before, was the part about young people. I'm really, really concerned about young folks who are protesting. They are the heart of the movement. They are who move us forward. They are who lead us into the future. And, we saw last summer that it was really young people coming out, college students, high school students, putting their bodies on the line for the movement. And I just want to explain to folks how HB 805 especially targets young people. And I know that I mentioned this before. I just want to explain why this is the case. So there was a big fight. Many of your groups may have been involved in that fight to raise the age at which children can be sent to adult court, right? So that was called the Raise the Age bill. It passed about 3 years ago, went into effect in 2019. And, that was a huge win. It was a huge win, but it was hard fought. And the Conference of District Attorneys in particular, and a number of other groups of sort of anti-progress groups pushed hard to exclude certain charges from that raising of the age, right? So, so before that bill passed, if you were 16 or 17 and you were charged with a crime, you could end up in adult court. And that was sort of the presumption, is that you would go to adult court if you were 16 instead of going to juvenile court, which is much more easily kept private. It's much more easy to move on from it when you become an adult because your record is not doesn't follow you into your adulthood, and it gives you a lot of more opportunities for access to services and rehabilitation as opposed to incarceration. Now, I'm not going to say that the juvenile court system is a good thing across the board, but it is better than having kids go to adult court. So that was a big change, but part of that compromise was that any child charged with a felony that is higher than a class G, and remember, felonies start at class A, that's the highest level felony, and they go down to that class H, so that's the lowest level felony. So if you get charged with a G felony or higher, and you're 16 or 17, then you automatically go to adult court. And so when you see them putting that class F felony into HB 805, they are knowingly targeting children, right? They are targeting 16 and 17-year-olds who may be out there protesting, and they want to make sure that those people, those kids, those leaders of the movement, that they end up in adult court, and that they have a permanent record, and that they have a serious felony to contend with. And so I just really wanted to highlight that, because it is, we know that people of all walks of life protest, but we also know that the risks for young Black kids who are protesting especially are much higher, and this bill only increases that. One other thing that I didn't get to talk about earlier about another piece of the bill that I just wanted to flag for folks is, property damage is a hot topic, right? And I'm gonna let Christy talk about this as well. Property damage is a hot topic because it's part of a debate both inside the movement to some extent, right? We see some debates and generational exchanges, and we saw that even with how some of the members of the House Democratic Caucus responded to the bill. Property damage is also a hot political issue at the local level, especially. When we saw city councils here in Raleigh, certainly other places as well, adding curfews and other things that they believed were responsive to concerns from the business community about property damage during protests. And, we know, right? We know people over property, right? Like people over property to the end. But in the political exchange about this bill and about protests, property damage gets a lot of discussion and a lot of attention. And so, what we see in this bill is there's a provision that would allow the owner of a piece of property that is damaged during what is termed, a riot, to go to court and sue anybody who was involved in that riot for 3 times the value of the property damage, right? So that's not just, fix my stuff and pay me back for the damage that you caused. That's pay me back twice and then pay me another 3 times to punish you, right? So it's not just about making somebody whole, it's about punishing anybody who's involved in property damage. And so I just really want to draw attention to that, that part of the bill is clearly sending a message that that when, you know, when property damage is used to draw attention to a movement cause, that they're going to value the property owner and the potential property damage over any of the messages or harms that the movement is trying to bring out. And I just want to give Christy a chance to weigh in on that as well, because I know there's been a lot of debate, and I know, you know, we had very challenging and I know angering to some people discussion, even on the House floor, from some older legislators who support the movement for Black Lives, but are concerned that property damage hurts the movement, and would love to, you know, hear from folks in the chat and hear from Christy a bit about, you know, how we deal with that part of the bill, because it is harmful to have that movement debate in the public sphere, and I think that that message has been sent. But also, here we have some of the most powerful people in the state coming down hard on property damage as it relates to protest. And that is, you know, it's angering, right? Because it completely flips on its head, you know, the real message. It's angering because it focuses in on the wrong things, right? We have people dying in the streets from police violence, and instead they're focused on getting triple damages back for property owners who may be affected by a protest, right? And that is just absolutely the wrong message. But Christy, I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about that piece if you'd like.
Oh, yeah. Well, the part about looting and property damage, I just think of the historical implications that, you know, if we look back into the history when Black folks were enslaved in this country, you know, whenever there was property damage, there was always this narrative that the freedmen's and the Yankees had done this thing, that the people who they owned were not that upset to riot and uprise in this way, that these outside agitators were coming in, stirring up their good Negroes. And so we've seen that same racist narrative, that racist trope throughout history. And this is just another reiteration of that racist trope, where it tries to pin that these outside agitators or these folks are coming in to do this property damage without understanding that the reason that people attack property, because that is what the state values. Nobody doesn't attack what you don't value, right? If I know that you value that window over my Black ass body, then I'm gonna break that window. And that's what we know as Black people, that our bodies and our identities have been commodified, but our actual existence is not appreciated in this country. And it is demonstrated every single time we see a law that that brings in this historical context into our present day consciousness. And so property damage, when we seek to protect property and not the people, that's a huge message from the state, that they value that window way more than they value that person and the dissent that that person is presenting. Because why are we out there anyway? Let's just get back to the basics, y'all. We were out there last summer because Derek Chauvin placed his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and refused to remove his knee from his neck because he assassinated George Floyd. And let me be clear about why I use that language of assassination, because anytime a Black man is killed by the police, at the hands of the police, it is a political death. Okay? And so he was assassinated by George Chauvin, and the world responded. And the state's response to the world's dissent is to further criminalize and punish people for voicing that dissent. And they say we live in a democracy. They say we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. But just like all the other false promises that this country has given, that's what comes out of their mouth. But actually what comes out of their actions is we live in a very oppressed, repressed, suppressed society. And this is a continuation of the oppression, suppression, the depression and repression of people and their movement. And we've seen this happen historically lots of times. But looting also challenges not just the police and the state and whiteness, it also challenges capitalism. Because think about it, if I can't afford a TV on a regular day, and I have an opportunity as a poor North Carolinian to go get me a brand new 72-inch that's got Roku and Netflix and all this stuff, why would I not go get the TV, y'all? Let's just be clear. Capitalism is such and racism is such that Black people, right? Do have a huge wealth gap. And so what is if people are going to try to close that gap by any means necessary, that is what that looks like. Now, is this an endorsement of that? No, but what I am saying is I understand it. And what I am saying is that if we want people to not loot, then maybe we should change the material conditions of their lives so that they don't feel the need to loot and to riot. And maybe if we hear them in spaces like Ann and I are in today at the General Assembly, maybe if their concerns and voices were heard and met, that they wouldn't have to engage in that behavior. What sayeth you, Ann?
Yeah, I appreciate all that, Christy. I think that's totally right. And I think what we're seeing here is exactly what you're saying, which is the valuing of property over, human bodies. We see that over and over again in the law. We see it throughout the carceral state, but we're also seeing it here in this bill, which is trying to prevent, people from engaging in, their constitutional right to speech, but also their right to kind of push beyond, to engage in disobedience and to push beyond that to actually move our society forward, right? And that we're seeing this prioritization of property as a way of pushing back on that. And I'll just, as we get ready to wrap up, I just want to just emphasize one other piece, which is how laws like this are designed to harm people of color more, and that is really it builds on itself and throughout the carceral state, right? So if folks are more likely to engage, to be coming across police in their life, more likely to potentially have some prior criminal record, our state's system makes it so that the next time you encounter police, the next time you engage in protests and are potentially over policed in that context, your charges are going to be higher, your sentencing is going to be higher, your fines are going to be higher, right? So it builds on itself. And this law is exactly part of that system. And it's deeply concerning. Jasmine, I saw you joined in, so I just wanted to give you a chance to jump in as well.
Oh, no, go ahead. Yeah, so y'all, this has been so amazing just listening to what you all have. Like, I have so many questions, and I know a lot of folks have been, texting us and commenting. So I wanted to ask you all a few questions before we ended your spot, because it's been so much information and it's been so good, and just wanted you all to elaborate further on some very key points here. And first, to begin, really want to talk about, the effects of HB 805, even if this thing is taken off of the table, even if 805 goes nowhere, like, what exactly is the impact and harm just by having something like this, presented, and how is that present, within community?
I was just going to say that I think, what we've seen historically happen is if a bill doesn't make it, it doesn't die. They bring it back again. So they are just building the momentum that they need. I call it like throwing spaghetti at the wall. They just be throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what's going to stick. And just so happened that this stuck this time thus far. And what I predict is that if it doesn't, so say we defeat the bill and we do all this hard work, I predict that we'll be right back here doing something similar under a different number, but it'll be the exact same language. That's unfortunately, that's my prediction. And what do you say?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that, the harm is that these ideas are out there, right? Once a bill is filed, whether it's good or bad, that language ends up circulating, right? So it can pop up again in another bill. It can pop up again two sessions from now. Someone can have the same idea, and all of a sudden there's this framework to pull from, right? And it gets kind of credibility. And so, in terms of inside the legislature, I think that is a big concern, right? That it kind of gives these ideas life. But it also, the media coverage and the attention on this issue, I mean, some folks might think this already became law, right? Like some folks who are out in the world communicating, and, certainly we try to be part of, putting forward accurate understanding of where things are. But if somebody just heard one story about this a couple months ago when it got filed and it passed through the House, they might already be afraid to go protest just because they heard about this. And they might believe that this law is going to affect them. And all of a sudden we have, folks who may have been eager to engage in constitutionally protected protests, and now they're scared to, right? And so it just takes filing it. It doesn't even necessarily require it to go into law for it to actually chill public engagement.
Wow.
And let me just add, Jasmine, real quick. This is just yesterday. I was riding down the street here in Raleigh. I was going by the Capitol and I saw a whole bunch of people at a protest for the Cuban Revolution. And my first instinct was to jump out, but then I saw the Capitol Police, not the Capitol Police, yeah, the Capitol Police. And I said, "Ugh. You know, I've been arrested so many times for this BS. Do I feel like going to jail tonight?" And I really had to sit there and be like, can't do it. I just can't do it. There's no telling if I'm gonna get out in time. Would anybody even know I was out here? So I had to go through this whole questionnaire in my mind of whether if I could even support people yesterday. And so the bill has already had a chilling effect. The current law has already had a chilling effect on me and others. Now, I'm not saying I'm hanging up my protest shoes. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is I have to go through a little bit more question and answer with myself about, do I engage? Am I available? Am I able to engage? And let's just be clear, it's not safe to just jump into a protest and don't nobody know you're there. And so that's part of the reason why I didn't, because I didn't know none of the people in there. And I was like, I don't know what. I mean, I hope, I don't even know, right? But, you know, the old Christy would have been like, But after seeing how the system has just really worked to silence me and others, it really does take a toll where you're just not as quick to engage as you were before. And I have to admit that that's even true of even me. And I'm somebody who's real resourced, that I know I'm gonna get out. I know I can argue to the magistrate. I already know I'm not gonna lose my job. I'm not gonna lose my house. But it's the hassle of engaging in the carceral state and being consistently involved in that system that is chilling. Because even if my cases gets dismissed, I still got it. You still dragging stuff out for months. And now I still got a criminal history. Well, it's already extensive, but still. And so, like, if I wanted to get stuff expunged, am I really going to be able to? Like, does this push my timeline out even further? Because I might be 10 years from my last conviction, but not if I get a new one. Now my timeline starts all over again. So it's all of those things that we have to be able to forecast out for ourselves and for the community, which make these type of bills so difficult, because there's so many ways in which this could go bad, and it's going to go bad for us. It's going to go bad for people who are already disenfranchised and disconnected from their humanity.
Come on. I mean, that is so important and so key. I think a lot of people have this misconception that, you know, when bills are filed and, you know, we protest, we do our thing and, you know, say it doesn't move and, you know, there's a lot of hoopla around, it doesn't move, that means it just goes away. And it's like, no, like these things actually have like lasting impact on communities, and specifically communities that look like you and I, who are up here, you know, on this panel. So that's real. And, you know, and leading into that, Christy, I also wanted to ask if it was okay. You know, I heard you mention in your spot, you know, your experience like protesting in Elizabeth City, you know, for the, you know, the purpose of, you know, the folks here and on this call. One, I wanted to ask, like, what was that experience like and what was leading you to go protest in Elizabeth City? If that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So Elizabeth City, Andrew Brown was murdered by the Pasquotank County Sheriff's Department. He was shot in the back of his head while attempting to escape being shot and assassinated by them. And so for me, it's important when there are protests happening that you know, the ACLU historically was founded upon free speech, right? And so protecting free speech. And so protest is a part of that. And so it's one of our fundamental rights in this country. And so we are hyper vigilant about supporting communities that want to engage in this way, making sure that they're supported. So I went down there in a coalition. It was myself, Emancipate NC, and the North Carolina Community Bail Fund. And we all went as a support. And so we began to, like, you know, just get with the help of all types of partners, Black Voters Matter, North Carolina Block, Advanced Carolina, like everybody was involved, Blueprint, in making sure that there was like this mass response of like water and all those things. But we were there as a support, and we were there over 30 days. We marched over 30 days in Elizabeth City, and we saw some, at the beginning, I saw police who were very nice. And I told the people, this is a trap. They're not just nice. I'm telling you, they're not just nice. Oh no, we know them. We grew up with them. We've been knowing them for years, and they live next door to us. And they still gonna run down on you when they get that order to run down on you. Trust and believe. And they don't think that they're your friend, because they're not gonna be. They're gonna put them handcuffs on you and them zip ties on you, friendly, but they still gonna take you to jail, right? And so it took a little while. But eventually, they began to arrest people. And let me just explain to y'all why they began to arrest people. Because they were tired. They were tired. What I witnessed over my years of protesting, that anytime the police are tired, that's the greatest potential danger for me and the community, is when the police are tired, because they begin to make rash decisions to send you home. So last year, June 2nd in Charlotte, where we were kettled and illegally kettled and almost tear gassed to death, the police were tired from the night before. The night before, at 4 in the morning, the officer came to me and said, Christy, why don't you and this crowd just go home? I told him, because we ain't got to, because we free. In case you didn't get in the proclamation, Emancipation Proclamation, we free. And that's why we ain't going home. And so because I told him that, the next day, they made sure we went home early, or they tried to make sure we went home early, right? And so like Elizabeth City, they were nice, like I said at the beginning. And let me be clear, they've been protesting there since Andrew Brown's death, and there has been no property damage, y'all. Not a window, nothing has occurred to any property there. So why would they arrest over 30 people in Elizabeth City? Why would they do that? You know why? Because it's not about property damage, y'all. It's about shutting your black ass mouth. Yeah. Keeping your black ass at home. That's all they want. They don't care. They want you to stay your ass out them streets. That's it. That's all they care about. They want compliance. They want to maintain law and order in the name of public safety. And so like, this is why they arrested us. Like I said, the first time I was arrested, it was on video. Y'all both arrested on video. But the officer lied. He swore to the magistrate that I refused to leave. But the video evidence shows that I told him I would leave twice because I was in the car. He arrested me in a car leaving. Right? He pulls me out of the car just to arrest me. Now, he arrested me because he was mad because I was talking big stuff to him, right? But that's my right, right? Freedom of speech. I can say what I need to say to y'all. And so the retaliatory nature of policing is such that it does not surprise me that Speaker Tim Moore has written a bill to address his cronies within the police department. Because let's be clear that the police, the legislature and the courts have refused to reduce the power and the scope of policing on purpose in this country. And that this is just another attempt to reduce our power and our scope of practice and expand the scope of the state's practice. And so what I learned in Elizabeth City is that what I already knew, no matter what you do, when the police get ready to run down on you, they're gonna run down on you. When they get an order to do whatever, they can internally tell you they know it's wrong. I had so many officers tell me they know it wasn't right, but they just had to do it because that's what their sergeant told them to do. They know it's not right. I've had several of them admit. I had one at the courthouse that was not letting people go into the court. I'm showing him the Constitution. The Constitution says that it's open, sir. I'm showing him all the stuff, you know, he said to me, I gotta do what the judge said do. No, you took a oath as a law enforcement officer that you you didn't say that you're supposed to obey the judge. It said that you're supposed to obey the Constitution and the North Carolina Constitution and all laws. And you're refusing to do that because a judge told you that you didn't have to follow the law. And so when you have that level of discretion as police, then this is why we have this type of law coming down to increase the discretion of the police so that those charges, instead of not being certified by magistrates, stick. And not only do they stick, they cause punitive consequences, oftentimes for the rest of people's lives, in order for them to shut up and stay home.
Oh my gosh. That is so interesting, especially because there's this narrative, I think from BLM and a lot of, protesters, that came out of the protests that happened last year, that there are good cops and there are bad cops. And it's like, no, it's actually just a fucked up system, at play. Like, and that's it.
Your grandma, your auntie, your cousin, all of them. Yeah, it's all. I don't care because at the end of the day, if my boss tells me right now, I work for the ACLU, my boss tell me to do something crazy, I'm not doing that. Are you kidding me? Like, period. Right. I'm not doing that, and we're gonna do it, and we're gonna roll however we roll. But not them. If they boss tell them to go over there and beat you down, they gotta go over there and beat you down. Like that.
Even if they feel bad about it.
Even if they feel bad, they're still going to do it. Listen, when they arrested me and they had the zip ties on so tight. You know, I start complaining immediately because I already know they only in there for 3 hours with them. Your hands be dead. So I started complaining immediately. And this one officer, his sergeant told him, no, she stays in those cuffs. I shamed him into letting it go. And he even said, well, just act like you got your hands together when you sit, because he didn't want the man to walk by and see that he had cut my hands out of the doggone zip tie.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? It's stuff like that where you know that, is that a good person? Sure. But is policing bad as a whole? Yes. And so you can have good people in bad situations. Prisons is full of good people in bad situations. Anybody hear me though?
Come on.
Hello? The prison is full of good people in bad situations. So like, it doesn't mean that because you are a good person that you can't be involved in a bad situation. You can be. And so like, how are you getting yourself out of that situation is the next thing. And I think that people who believe that police are good have never seen the police be bad. All it takes is one time to see them be bad, and they'll forever change your mind. If you didn't see that 65-year-old lady on the side of 85 when the police threw her down on the side of the ground and broke her shoulder, if that don't show you that they bad, then you just want a cap for the police.
Ooh, yes. You know, and I know we're coming to the close of you all's spot, but also wanted to just ask, do you all mind just sort of breaking down like the discrepancies in the word riot in this bill and like what that can mean for folks? I mean, you've all talked a lot about, you know, the adverse, you know, implications, but really just breaking it down, like when they are using the word riot, like what comes with that? What are the discrepancies with that?
Yeah, so if I understand the question, I mean, you know, I think as I was saying at the very beginning, under like right now, under North Carolina law, rioting is very broadly defined, right? I mean, it includes anything that a group of people are, you know, that's perceived a group of people may be disorderly or violent, potentially threatening property or people, or just threatening any of that, right? So we're talking about like, you know, and I hesitate because I'm a lawyer and I always feel like I need to have like specific cases in mind, and I don't. I want to be really clear about that. You know, I'm just imagining a situation right now, right, where maybe you have a situation that's not even a protest, right? Maybe you just have a group of, let's say, 5 young men who happen to be even play fighting on the street corner, or maybe just like, you know,
making a TikTok.
Or just like being guys, right? Like messing around, you know, and maybe somebody else perceives that, maybe a police officer perceives that as, you know, imminent threat of violence, right? And all of a sudden you have the potential to charge rioting just because you have that very broad definition. Right now, like I said, I don't have in my mind a specific case of where that's happened, but the law does not prevent that from happening, right? And that's what we need to see. What we need to see is, you know, at a minimum, we need to actually change our current law, not go in the direction that 80 Ohio is going, but we actually need to change our current law so that you cannot be charged with something that someone else does, right? I mean, that's the biggest concern that we have with the way rioting can be charged right now, right? Like, so the whole group can be charged for just that threat of violence or disorderly conduct sort of as a group. But if one person in that group then goes and breaks a window or goes and kicks over that trash can and dents a piece of public property, all of a sudden everybody's got a felony, even if they were standing way on the other side of the street. And so, you know, that is the piece that we are deeply concerned about, that we believe may even be unconstitutional. You know, that you can be charged with a serious felony for the actions of another person. And that's what I keep hammering at home because it's so egregious. It's egregious that it's in our current law, and it's egregious that they would take it and then ratchet it up so many levels and really double down on that unconstitutional sort of charging of somebody for somebody else's behavior and holding someone responsible for someone else's behavior. So that's kind of the main message that I have about the bill. If somebody has a specific question about, you know, rioting and the definition, we could certainly connect you with, you know, a criminal defense attorney who might have a better sense for how it actually has played out in a real case.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, thank you so much for laying that out, Ann. I mean, and then I see a comment here in the chat saying, souls to the polls. Like we getting rowdy, whatever, at souls to the polls. Like that's something that my great aunt goes to souls to the polls, and she's 95. I can't even fathom. She's just excited as the next person. I can't even fathom like her like having a felony or like
or even being pepper sprayed or exposed to chemical
yeah.
munitions, less than lethal weapons. Think about your grandma being sprayed in her face. And I don't know if y'all saw the tape that came out of Alamance County, the body camera, and they were like, I knew you were going to be the one to do it. They were celebrating spraying children in their faces with chemical munitions. Like the Alamance County Sheriff's Department were spraying children and were happy to spray children. And if you watch the tape of the body cameras from the police in Charlotte last year, they said they were going to hammer our asses. That was their language. They wanted to hammer us. They didn't want to maintain order. They wanted to hammer us. They wanted to harm us. And so your grandmother at Souls to the Polls, if she is marching, can be subjected to, to police behavior. And they say less than lethal, but just because it doesn't kill you doesn't mean it doesn't kill your soul and your spirit.
Come on. Come on. Come on. It's another way to scare folks. Well, Ann and Christy, I really want to thank you both for being on. Is there anything else you would like to say, to help wrap the spot, or folks, anything you want to give like a quick takeaway from your segment?
I'll let Ann give the takeaway about the bill, but if the people, the power lies within the people. If you have not been to this building and you would like to come, email me, kwilliams@acluofnc.org. We have gas cards to incentivize you to come, to spend time with us, and to learn more about this building. And I'll pass it to you, Ann.
I got nothing to say other than please come here. We would love to host you, to show you around, help you talk to your legislators. You can meet with your legislators at home. If you live far away from Raleigh, we can help you do that as well. I hope that's still C3 compliant, but basically speak your voice, and we got to speak up about this. So thank you all so much for being here.
No, we thank you. We are just excited to have had you both on. Thank you so much, Ann and Christy. Great information that they offered. Oh man. Ready for my co-host. I'll wait a second so my co-host here can get pinned and we can chew on that. So Joe, what did you think about the spot? Like, you have any takeaways or any thoughts?
I mean, just amazing. And, Chrissy's just speaking truth to power, truly, like laid it down, right? So deep appreciation for ACLU coming in and just really grounding us in, HB 805 and just what the real life implications are. Like, this is real life. This is people's livelihood, right? And so just really putting, own personal narrative to kind of the overarching, message and impact of this bill was just super powerful. So, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was glued to the screen. I know that.